Welcome to the ADHD Mums podcast, a safe place for everyday Australian mums to discuss their struggles with ADHD, motherhood and life.
Hello and welcome to the next episode of ADHD Mums. Today we have Alison Balson, a family dynamic strategist and neurodiversity coach, a former teacher, a current childcare centre owner, mum of 4, 2 exceptional children and a partner of 20 years and wife for 15. After graduating university nearly 20 years ago, Alison went on to work in primary schools in Southeast Queensland and North Queensland. She met her now husband and together they have achieved a lot. Safe to say there are some flags for both autistic and ADHD here. In the span of 20 years, some of their achievements include successfully flipping 8 properties and moving home 8 times, navigating 3 house floods, experiencing 6 pregnancies and welcoming 4 babies, adjusting to 6 ADHD diagnoses and 5 autistic diagnoses, acquiring a service-based business just in time for the global pandemic. Sorry to laugh during that, but
it was such good timing.
My face as I read that was like, oh my God. Developing a commercial property and establishing another service-based business. With a background in child development and experience as a teacher and a mother, Alison identified what she considered crucial gaps in the parenting and the curriculum areas that she considered essential for fostering the growth of little people into well-rounded big people. When her youngest child started school, Alison found herself with a little spare time, doubtful, but okay, leading to the creation of the incremental shift. As a family dynamic strategist and ADHD coach, Alison adopts a comprehensive approach, diving into the details of family dynamics. She considers home setups, personality styles, parenting methods, neurodiversity, value, strengths, child development, and environments. Her unique approach blends lived experience with a wealth of knowledge, offering strategies, practical support to raise awareness, modify environments, and equip parents with the tools. Based on the Gold Coast, Alison passionately supports people in developing and growing their family units. What an intro. Welcome to you, Alison.
I know, that's a bit scary, isn't it?
If you said to me that you were neurotypical, I would question that. I'm like, that is an ADHD bio right there.
Absolutely. It's also autistic though, because there is the structure involved in all of those projects that we've undertaken.
You know, I'm starting to get pretty good at picking people up. So when I read that, I wasn't going to say anything, but I thought there's a lot of detail there, which is a very Aspie detail. It's like, give me your bio. And you've written like every single thing possible. It's like asking my husband, what did you do today? And it starts in the beginning. Today I woke up. Then I had a shower. And I'm like, okay,
Yes.
I was just asking how your day was. Like, I don't have 15 minutes, mate.
So true. And look, if I'm being really honest, I left out like half of it because I thought it's just getting way too detailed and long-winded.
Well, I enjoyed it. And I also love the detail because I have found out so much about you, do you know what I mean, in the beginning. So I love that in a really detailed bio, because sometimes you start off and you're thinking that you're interviewing someone about something and then you end up in a different direction. You're like, wow, actually, that's a really fascinating take on it. So Alison approached me with a really great topic that I know next to nothing about. So I'm really excited to interview her about that. And it is the dual spectrum, navigating giftedness and neurodivergence, which I'm really excited to hear about. Before we dive into that, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and your own diagnosis journey, just a little bit before we get into giftedness?
Yeah, sure. So I think for me, neurodiversity has been in my family since I was born. I had a family member with ADHD, also twice exceptional, but that wasn't diagnosed back then. And I saw how my parents tried literally everything to support this family member. And then so fast forward to, me having my own kids, aren't they a blessing to teach you lots and lots of lessons? Coupled with my education and my lived experience with my eldest child, there were lots of red flags and very typical ADHD red flags, like wouldn't sleep, was just like he was on or he was off. There was no in between. And then with the twice exceptionalness, his first word was car. So it wasn't mama, wasn't dada, it was car. But it took a while to, like, at this point I was like, yeah, he's ADHD. And I didn't think anything of it, really. I was not putting 2 and 2 together that potentially I too had it at that point. But it took a while to get the diagnosis. This was probably a decade ago now. And the pediatrician said to me, he's just a boy, just leave him alone. He's just a boy. And we went to the psychologist, and the psychologist did the psychometric testing on him. But unfortunately, there was a data glitch and she lost all the data.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and wouldn't diagnose him because in the psychometric testing, apparently you can only do it once every 2 years. Yeah, so he'd already done it. So he couldn't redo it. She didn't have the data. What do we do, kind of thing. And there was also the whole element of, oh, you're a first-time mother. What do you know, kind of thing, which sucked really hard. So when he did eventually get his ADHD diagnosis, I was like, yep, sweet, got it. But his ASD diagnosis shocked me. And I really wasn't expecting it. And I think there was so much to unpack because my brain was heading in one direction. Yep, tick ADHD. And then to be told, yes, that, but also ASD and also twice exceptional. I had to do a lot of research. And that was when the penny really started to drop. And I was like, oh, okay, I get it. I see where he gets it from. And then it was easier to, at this point, my second child was getting diagnosed. My husband got diagnosed. And then the third and the fourth child was like, yeah, we've got this. We know what's going on. So that's the very long-winded story on how I got diagnosed. But it's always easy to connect in reverse. So,
Burning question I'd love to know. What is the difference between exceptional, twice exceptional, and gifted and like high IQ? I don't know if they're all in the same boat. Is it all the same wording or?
look, twice exceptional as I know it is that you are both gifted or you have high talent, but you also have disabilities or neurodevelopmental disorders as well. So you're gifted in terms of your high abilities or talents like maths, science, art, you're creative, that kind of thing. But you struggle in other areas that affect learning or daily functioning. So ADHD, ASD, dyslexia, dyscalculia, dysgraphia, those kinds of things. And these disabilities can impact their ability to, the child's ability, the person's ability to learn in quite traditional ways, and also impact processing information, being able to maintain focus and those kinds of things. And as a parent, there's a need to be, I feel there's a need to be across their special abilities, but also their disabilities, which is an interesting predicament because that's when, and I joke about it like, you can go and work out how to build a car engine, but you can't find your shoes and socks. And that is literally the dynamic of it. You are exceptional in terms of your brain is just wildly clever, but you have a disability in that you can't plan ahead and you can't maintain focus, and you've got task initiation problems with, writing a shopping list, yet you can build a car engine from the ground up. So that's where your twice exceptional comes into play. It sounds amazing, like, oh my gosh, you're twice exceptional. But the dynamics is, in fact, that you are covering, in terms of a spectrum, you're covering both ends of it.
That's fascinating. I think my middle son would probably be twice exceptional. I haven't even realized because the school contacted and said he's dyslexic. So he's nearly 7 and he's still got his H's the wrong way, his B's the wrong way, and he's got some areas, particularly in reading, that he's awful, like awful. But then when I took him for dyslexia testing, they actually came up to me and said, oh, he's actually gifted in maths and coding. And I was like, oh, I don't know what to do. So he's dyslexic in reading and writing, but then gifted in maths and coding. So it's like at school, he's either the worst at the English stuff or he's bored by maths, basically.
Yep. And I think too, the other thing with ADHD is that they respond so much on the environment around them in terms of if they really like the teacher, it would not matter what they are teaching. they're just having a great time, so they will naturally do better. But if they don't like the teacher or they just grind against them, they don't care less. There is no amount of positive reinforcement and motivation that will help them to improve or do well. The other interesting thing is English is so highly executive functioning loaded in terms of you have to think about a topic, break it down, work out what your thoughts are on the topic, schedule it into some sort of a story or a report or some sort of a structure. Like, it's just the multi-steps involved in a lot of English is painful for ADHDers. So that's why you will often find that they, on their report cards, their marks are lower in anything that requires writing or a lot of thinking and structuring and organizing of thoughts, versus maths and science, where it's like yes or no, in the moment, exciting experiments and those kinds of things. So you definitely will see that.
Yeah, and I suppose as well with English, there's no answer. And I think that does my kids' head in. They want to know what's the answer. And it's like, well, it could be this, that's a great story, but it's not concrete or black and white enough, is what I tend to see with mine anyway.
Yes. And also on the flip side with maths and science, for example, and music even, ADHDers need the concrete things to move around, to understand. And that's why with English, I always say, get them to get all their thoughts out, because they've got amazing thoughts. Get them to get them out and then cut the thoughts up and reorder them physically, actually on the page, reorder them, because then that's engaging both sides of the brain so that they are more inclined to get the structure right and those kinds of things.
So how do your kids go with mainstream schooling then? Because as I said, my son is either the worst or he's bored. It never seems to hit him where he needs it in terms of it being a little bit difficult. He's learning, but he's still comfortable and building confidence. He's either one or the other. And it seems to be a problem for him.
My family are fortunate. We have an amazing school. The teachers there are all well-schooled in neurodiversity, but a lot of it comes back to having open communication with the teacher and being able to say, being the advocate for your child. This is what he does really well in. This is where he struggles. Even having the child write about me. Like, we always have these about me things, which is like, I'm 7, I like blue, blah, blah, blah. Whereas if they have things like, I do best with short instructions, or I prefer visual schedules. So being able to get across how they learn best just helps to build that rapport with the teacher. Which then also comes back to, they actually need to know themselves. So being able to educate them in, how do you like to be told instructions? Do you like it when mum stands at the top of the stairs and screams 3 things at you? Do you prefer to have all of your morning jobs written out on paddle pop sticks and then you just put them into the jar once you've done them all, and you can then have some autonomy over what you do when you do it? Like, how do you like to do these things? And then being able to scaffold that in a school setting makes the world of difference.
Yeah, okay. That makes sense, because then when they're looking for jobs or career paths, they are aware of what they're good at and what they're not good at, to make a better choice than, to pick something that's not going to be of interest.
Yep, for sure.
So what about your children and their diagnosis journey? Is there anything you'd like to share there?
It was a wild, I think because I have 4 kids, it was the first 2 that were the tricky ones. And then by the 3rd and the 4th kid, I was like, I got it. I know what's happening here. But the first one, yeah, like I said, the ADHD was obvious. He has combined type. So it was obvious. He just did not turn off until he literally turned off. The ASD was a bit of a shock, but then once I worked through that, it was obvious too. My second child was diagnosed ADHD, inattentive, and ASD at the same time. and they were all diagnosed as gifted at the same time as well. But I think for the second one, because he was inattentive, not combined type, the autistic symptoms, I guess, presented more for me. So that's why I could quite easily distinguish, yes, you've obviously got ASD, but once the ADHD is worked on with medication and whatnot, it's often the ASD traits can come forward more as well. But yeah, then when the third and fourth came along, I got this. I know what you guys are. You're awesome. Let's do it.
Yeah, and it's always kind of trial and error on the first one, and then I feel a little bit like guilty because I'm like, I really kind of got myself a bit more together the third time round. But, the first one you're kind of learning.
Oh, absolutely. And like, there is no rule book. There is no manual for how to parent children. Yet everybody kind of walks around like, you should know. And, like, why haven't you got this together? Like, and I think that's, back in the day where there was the people around you to help you do these things. It just doesn't exist, but you're meant to know. And I think that puts an immense amount of pressure on parents to know everything and to be able to know what to do in all these situations. And it's unfair and it's too much.
Yeah, and there's so much information accessible. It's almost too much, because it'd be so much easier if you just had to wait a week to speak to somebody and then they tell you and give you a pamphlet or a book and then you just read that. But there's so much different information. There is not necessarily a right answer to parenting. Everyone has a viewpoint. So if you start going down, a spiral of doom and you get on your phone, you might read about all the things you've been doing and see it as wrong, which can be really upsetting as well. One thing I really wanted to ask you was how you go managing it all, Alison. Like, you've got 4 kids, you've got lots of diagnoses, you've got lots of neurodivergence. How do you go with it all?
I'm very routined. I'm very structured. I think I definitely still have my moments of potential burnout. I don't have burnout anymore, but I'm a lot quicker at recognizing the signs of it. I have a lot of external accountability now, which has been a game changer for me with my ADHD. I have other people who rely on me for stuff other than my children. So I have to do it. I have to get it done. And so the external accountability has been great. I limit my priorities. I don't have enough energy, enough bandwidth to hold everything anymore. I need to limit it, and I've really worked on that a lot over the last 6 years. I utilize tech a lot. So I have alarms and stuff, but I also just simple tech, like putting the washing on at night with the timer on so that it's ready to hang out in the morning, just so that it's not the end of the week when you got to wash 6 people's clothes and towels and sheets and everything. It's like the weeks that I do forget, that's my whole weekend washing. That's not fun. And I also am very intentional. So in regards to like social media and that kind of thing, I acknowledge whether I'm having a doom scrolling session or whether I'm doing something intentional. And then I stick with it. I'm happy to go, yep, this is a doom scrolling session. I'll just do what you like, relax, chill, scroll for an hour, 2 hours, whatever, go to sleep. But I don't then micro shame myself for that. I just, in the moment, acknowledge it. Yep, that's what it is, and move on.
Do you have some pretty good organizational systems? It seems like you would.
Look, whilst I say I utilize tech, I find tech for my day-to-day stuff is hopeless because it just gets lost in the device. I have gone back to paper. I know, not good for the environment. However, paper and sticking it up on the wall, because the thing with ADHD is that if it's not in front of them, it's dead. It could be in a cupboard, doesn't matter. So I need to have all my important things in front of me stuck on a wall so that I know that I'm ticking through them. I have a daily list of things that I do. And that is the same every day, every week. And if I have to reschedule some of them, then I actually plan them into the diary. I don't wait for them to happen. So a lot of it is planning ahead, which is painful but necessary.
Yeah, I agree. I've actually gone back to paper too. So interesting that you say that. Reason being is because visually, yes, but also because I found that I was kind of like living by my phone because I had to like check it. So I was like checking it. Then I was like, oh, I should recancel that. Oh, that's stressing me out. Oh, that's a big week. And I couldn't turn off from it. So I had to go back to paper. Agree with you, not great for the environment, but I found like I was driving myself mad with my phone even more than usual.
Yeah, 100%. I put all of my appointments into my phone, but then on a Thursday for the next week, I print out my schedule for the next week, and that goes up on the wall. So I'm not flicking my phone to find out where I'm supposed to be, which day, and those kinds of things, because I find that there's like a millisecond where you see another app and the other shiny balls come up, and then ping, you're distracted and onto the other ones. So it just minimizes those kinds of irritating things too.
Yeah, it's difficult to like be in the moment or do something when you've got your notifications on. Yeah, it's a tricky one actually because you need to know some things and sometimes you need to switch off. So knowing which one can be really difficult for a neurodivergent brain, I think, as well. Going back to the gifted, is there any communication around like schooling that or like tutoring or, a way of nurturing the giftedness?
Pre-diagnosis, it's often dismissed because a lot of parents, oh, my child's gifted. In order to actually be gifted in terms of the DSM or to actually get the diagnosis, it varies too, because even the psychometric testing, you can be gifted in this area, but not this area. You can be gifted in, because a lot of it too is non-traditional school type things. So for example, music, art, coding. I personally like to push those things outside of school because I think it's good to have a balance across friendship groups, across school and across outside of school, so that if something socially is awkward or going wrong at school, then they've got these other avenues to feel success. And it's also something that they're really good at. Sorry, then I just got distracted from your question. Did that answer your question?
Oh, no, I thought it did because basically you're saying to go and look at that program and then nurture them where they're at out of school, which I think is clever because then you're not putting pressure on the school to provide this extension program and also provide possibly, like a learning plan for them with something they're not good at. And then if everybody does that, you can imagine, I understand there's so much pressure on the schools. So it can be really difficult. It's a question I always ask myself because my middle son is probably the least maintenance. Like he's the kid I have the least amount of hands-on with the school. He's not easy by any means, but he's the least time suck in terms of meetings and supports that he needs and therapies, blah, blah. But then I always wonder to myself, am I doing enough? Because he's, people are like, oh, he's so gifted. And because he kept saying to me for months, we're not doing any maths at school because he didn't realize he was learning because it was so easy. But then at the other end, he's struggling so much. And I always wonder, am I doing enough? But then I just think, oh God, there's so much going on. How can you add anything else in anyway?
And I think in that instance, there is always more you can do. And that pressure for a parent to know that there's always more that they could be doing that's like a stab to the heart. Because I have one of those children too, who kind of just like flies under the radar, and like he's just, yeah, he flies under the radar. But the thing that I've worked on with him is that one-on-one connection. So it's not go and do, sign up for another weekly class or something like that. It is literally a one-on-one connection at home, where it might only be 15 minutes a week, but that 15 minutes connection forms so much authentic, genuine, deeper connection with that child that fills their cup up.
Yeah, that makes complete sense, actually. And, if we all did everything that we could possibly do for our kids, we would be even more exhausted than we already are.
Totally.
So is there any point, do you reckon, getting the giftedness testing? Like, if there was a mum that was listening to this going, oh, I wonder if my child's gifted. Like, when do you actually, because this is like another assessment, it's more money, more cost. And if you're not necessarily taking action on it, then is there a point?
For us, there was a point where we got to at school, not at our current school, where they weren't actually, from my perspective, it was like they weren't believing me. Like, I would say to them, he's not challenged, he's bored, he needs something more. And they would say to me, yeah, but he's only getting B's and C's. And I would talk to him and he would say, Mum, it's so boring. The motivation was not there. It was not exciting. And then when we got the testing done, which said, yes, ADHD, yes, ASD, but also giftedness. And the report then, the magical report said he needed extension and he needed things that required more of him to stimulate his brain to get excited about learning. Then when I presented that, they were like, oh, okay, well, we don't do that here. So that's when we changed schools. So it was important for that because they said to me, oh, he's very gifted with reading, but not so much with X, Y, and Z. So they were acknowledging that there was a giftedness there, but also they weren't doing anything about it. So in that situation, the only thing that I could do was like mother's word against teacher was, no, here's the external assessments. And that helped.
And so what is he gifted in?
He's gifted musically. At the time of the assessment, we didn't know that. He was also very early to read. So he was reading quite advanced things for his age. And like a lot of ADHD, ASD kids, whatever he is hyper focusing on, he can tell you every detail about it. Stuff that you didn't even know was possible. And at the moment, one of my kids was learning about Chernobyl. And if you ever wanted to know anything about Chernobyl, you could ask him and he would know everything. Before that, it was the Titanic and he could tell you everything about the disaster. And so he was just hyper focused on that. So the actual, like, what is he gifted in? For my children, it's not like he's uber gifted in maths and nothing else. Some of them are very gifted in maths, music. One of mine can literally build a car engine from the ground up just by doing. So it's not quite so clear cut.
No, that makes total sense, actually. And I think you've made a great point that if you're managing a child, or I hate saying that, but it's like I had a friend's child and I knew him from when he was really little. And I said, oh, how's he going at prep? I mean, I don't see her very often. And she said that he'd actually been on the roof at prep and he was throwing rocks off the roof onto teachers and he'd been in a lot of trouble and he was looking at getting expelled, but he was under the assessment process. And as a part of the assessment process, they found that he was in the top 0.1% of the population IQ-wise, and he was incredibly bored. And I mean, I know we're talking gifted and there is definitely ranges. He's like beyond gifted. Like this kid is insanely intelligent across basically everything. And when they actually figured out his intelligence level, they were able to give him different work. They moved him up a couple of grades and suddenly his behavior settled down. So he's gone from a child that would probably have been expelled, moved from school to school, become very disruptive with a trajectory that it would be unknown. And also what a devastating thing for the world to miss out on such a beautiful brain that clearly could do amazing things. But so I understand your point. I think it's really important because we don't know why some children are disruptive or they withdraw or they're not engaged. We don't know the reason why. And I was really shocked that my son was gifted. I was completely shocked. So you don't always know what's there either. I think that's a great point.
And it's also like often a blanket judgment here is that boys are naughty. But if you dig deeper, they're actually bored, or they're not absorbing the information the way that it is being presented to them. They're not naughty. They're just showing you that this is not working for them. And then it's up to the teacher or the parent to be able to turn the environment around to craft it in a way that they can learn, or that they can do, you know, their morning routines and all of those things. And I think that once you wrap your head around that, it's less about the child and it's more about the behavior that they are doing. So you don't hate the child, you hate the behavior, or you dislike the behavior. And the behaviors can be changed. And I find that a lot of behaviors that neurodiverse children are presenting with, once the parent understands the neurodiversity, the behaviors drop away. So they might initially come for the behavioral issues, but once the parent understands the neurodiversity, it all falls away. And that's not actually the problem.
Oh, absolutely. It's funny. We're 5 for 5 in neurodiversity in our house. I know you're 6 from 6, so you get it. So my husband doesn't like to be told what to do. If I directly tell him what to do, he will not do it. But if I ask him some questions, telling him my point of view, I often find 24 hours later, he will do what I've asked. Like, he's a very good man, but a quick way to get him to not do it is to ask him directly or give him some kind of ultimatum. If I do that, he just doesn't. There's no way I can engage him. He's completely shut off. So it's interesting because he would then communicate with my middle son, who's a mini hubby, and he would say to him, do this or else, or if you don't do this, you can't get your ice cream. If you don't do this, you can't do that. And I said to him the other day, how would you feel if I said to you, if you don't pick up your towel, I'm not having sex with you? And he's like, totally. And I was like, well, the ice cream is actually really important. It's the only ice cream he gets. And if you say to him, if you don't put your plate on the bench, like, is there any other way you can communicate that? And it's been really interesting to kind of, the way that we process information is often similar. And so I've said to him, you know, you really got to look at the way you communicate. And then, surprise, surprise, my middle son is then a lot more engaged because of the way it's delivered.
Yes, 100%. And that's within my work. So navigating diagnosis, educating parents in the diagnosis, educating parents in terms of what self-care looks like, because self-care for neurotypicals is different to the neurodiverse, and parental growth. And I think that's been the biggest blessing for me, is the parental growth. Once I knew about the diagnosis, once I even had an inkling of the diagnosis, the parental growth has just been astronomical in terms of your exact example there. If you change the way that you deliver something, the uptake is going to be more likely. So being able to create this village for people is what I feel that I missed when I was going through this process with my own kids, because I needed someone around me who could tie it all together. I needed, like, yes, we went to all the appointments, we went to psych, we went to OT, we went to speech, but there was no one there that was tying it into, what does this actually look like in your home? What does this look like for your relationship with your partner? What does this look like for your other children, your relationship with your other children? And the therapy is all focused on the child, not the family unit. So that's what I did with the village. I created this space where we could focus on the whole family unit.
I agree with you. I noticed that a lot of it is centered on that one child. And I don't like the idea that you have a child that needs to be fixed, and I'm air quoting, and then you drop that child off like a bag of potatoes at the therapist, and then you pick it up like, is the kid fixed yet? And then you take the kid back in the car. You don't actually know what's going on. You don't implement anything at home. You don't change anything. But you take that child, which is like a bag of potatoes, I call it, from office to office as an Uber driver, with the best of intentions as a parent. That's not a bad parent. That's a committed parent that actually takes the time. It's a lot of work on them with multiple children, but there's no one tying it in.
Just on the bag of potatoes being dropped off, you also have to go and drop them off at varying psychologists to see if you fit, to see if there's a connection there in order to get the most out of the therapy. And then after a while, it's like, and I had this with my eldest, it's like, why am I seeing this person? Is there something wrong with me?
Yeah, and I think there's, for me anyway, my opinion is there's not a lot of positivity doing therapy all week after school. I didn't find it to be a positive experience driving my children around and then entertaining the other two in random locations, picking one up, putting one back. I didn't feel there was any positive relationship between me and the child or the other children that I'm trying to take care of. And then you're rushing around, and I felt like I had a real decline on myself, which then made me more stressed, which then heightened everybody up anyway. And it was all for this therapy that I didn't actually really know if it was working or not, because I could never speak to them because I had another two. And if they want to talk to you outside of that, you're then at work or you've got your own stuff to do. And then if all of them want to talk to you, it just felt like an impossible thing. So I really agree with you. We've had to reduce therapies down and then do them through me is generally the way I like to do it. We only have one person that comes inside the house that the kids work with, because I had the same thought pattern. I was like, what's this for? And what benefit are we getting? I had to do it to realize that it wasn't for me. But I had you've got that thing maybe it's when you get on the NDIS and they ring you and then you feel like you have to. They put you on the therapy train and you're like, can I get off this thing? Because this is shit.
Yeah, and a lot of, like, I agree 100%. The NDIS has been amazing, revolutionizing, but it did certainly, like, I empathize with everything that you said, entertaining the other children, dropping them off, picking them up, not having that connection. I think that the best time that I've ever had with therapy has been with a speech and an OT, where so my youngest, before he went to school, he went and had speech therapy, and we would go every week, and I would sit in there with him. I would know what he's doing. And then afterwards we'd go to the coffee shop and we'd make a little date out of it. And now in grade 2, he still talks about the mummy days of when, we had the special things going on. So it was a connection building as well as therapy. And then you transition into school where exactly like you described, you're dropping off, you're picking up, you don't get to see them. Or if you do get to see them, it's 5 minutes while you've got one hanging off you and the other one's just, the cyclone in the waiting room. So you're not even taking it in. But you need, it's necessary only if they need it and if they're getting something from it. One of my kids was just like, absolutely not. I'm not going there. I don't learn anything. And we've even had psychologists say, look, he actually knows it all. He knows it all. But in reality and in practice, that is where he needs the skilling. But then if you put him into a group situation, he says, Mum, why are you putting me with all these weird people? So it was at that point where I was like, this is not working. And the same therapy worker does not necessarily work for each of your children. You've got to find the right fit. So there is so much toing and froing and experimenting, and then, God forbid, they're booked out or they move, or so then you really are on the therapy train.
Yeah, and I think this is where I just felt like done with it. And I was like, we're just going to have one thing that we're doing, one therapist, and I'll work with them in the background, and anyone else can come through me. Like speech, I'll do with an app with them myself, because it felt too taxing to have people coming in constantly or us going places constantly. And every day was like a logistical nightmare.
Yeah. And the benefits aren't always so cut and dry. They're not always, are they getting speech therapy? Tick or no. And how does the mum feel in that? Because when the mum is burnt out, it all goes down the toilet.
Yeah, absolutely. And then what is the benefit to coming home on that afternoon and having 20 minutes of one-on-one with each child?
None. There is no benefit, because you're then home, you're into dinner, you're into unpack bags. Where's your lunchbox? Get your guitar for tomorrow. Where's your uniform? You know, you turn into the drill sergeant, because that window that you may or may not have had is gone.
Well, exactly. That's what I mean. Like if you cleared the afternoon, right, and actually spent some one-on-one time with each child, even 15 minutes each, right? The hour that you would have spent driving around, if you just cleared that time and did that, what benefit would there be? And that's what I figured out with equine. And I love equine, but it was a long drive. I had 3 kids. I had half an hour each kid. It was a nightmare. Everyone got car sick on the way. And then in the end, I thought to myself, I could just go home and do 20 minutes one-on-one with each kid, because that's what I think they want. And I know it's not the same as equine, but it's not the same for every kid. Equine's great, but for us, that worked better.
Or just going to the park with them in the afternoon, because they've had to keep, pardon the language, but they've had to keep their shit together all day at school. They just want to be free. They just want to be able to do their thing, relax, recharge, get rid of some excess energy. Everyone is more peaceful when you then return home.
Yeah, and I'm going to call a spade too. I think most people would agree with this. I've run NDIS companies myself, and there's definitely people that are in there for the right reasons. Absolutely, there is. There's also a lot of money on the line. And I found that some providers have wrung me out of nowhere, and I felt like they almost push on the mum guilt for a sale. Like, oh, what do you mean you're not doing any speech? Oh my God. And then you feel like you should do all of these things. And I've fallen into that trap before. And then at the end of it, I thought to myself, I wonder if they actually care or whether they wanted the booking. And sometimes for me, the providers have felt a little manipulated.
I think we've been self-managed, we've been plan managed, and I certainly can empathize with that, which is, you know, why they're doing the inquiry and why there's more effort going into that now. That said, I think it's not unlike any other business. There's some people who are there to rip you off. There's some people who are there because they genuinely care. It's unfortunate that it is about our most prized thing in the world, our children. And that's where I think you need to go back to your mum barometer, your dad barometer. What sits best? How does this sit with me? Is this my intention? My intention of having a family, was that to run them from therapy to therapy to therapy so that I could spend the NDIS money? Or, why did I have kids in the beginning? What's my end goal with having kids? Well, hopefully it's to have a resilient, fully functioning adult. So let's work back from there. Not let's try to fix them. Let's work back.
Yeah, I agree. And that's where I think the mum gut feel, like you've talked about, is important. And you kind of have to almost go through it. I think it would be difficult for somebody to not overcommit therapy-wise and really understand how that feels. You've almost got to do it and then realize, oh, this is something I might want to get off. But sometimes I have felt like in the past when I've cancelled services, the provider really goes on a guilt train. That's how I've felt. I'm like, oh, right, okay. But then being able to advocate for yourself is important too, because I've had to really pull up some boundaries and say, I'm just really confused when we get home at 5:30 at night. We've been out for 3 hours. I've been juggling all of this. The kids just break apart because they've been holding it together for like 12 hours. And I'm home alone because my husband's gone to work. And I've missed all the window for him to help me. Like, tell me how this amount of stress is actually going to benefit anybody.
Yep. I'm really sorry that you went through that, because it does add, like, parenting has this invisible layer of guilt anyway, without having someone else dump more on you. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, and I had to be really careful with boundaries. And I always say to people now, especially mums that maybe aren't in this industry as much as I am, I've said to them before, just because it's a speechy or a psych or whoever it is, doesn't mean that's right for you and your family. But sometimes I think it's like a medical professional. It's like you have to obey authority. I started off like that anyway. I was like, oh, well, the OT recommended this, so we must do it all.
Yeah, like you said, you've got to try it, find out what works, like the NDIS works on the individual, because there's no other way that that whole plan could work. So it has to work on the individual, but then it's up to the parent to be able to work out, how is this going to work for the family? How's it going to work for the benefit of all of us as a family unit? What is going to work?
Absolutely. We are going to finish up, I think, Alison. Is there anything you'd like to share before we finish?
I just had some do's. I said, so things to do, keep trying. ADHD brains need variety. And when you think you've tried it all, start again, try again, because the variety will kick in. Be kind, because for those who are masking abilities, it's exhausting. So be kind and join the village, join my village, because we get it, we live it, and we really love it and support it in a positive way. And I'd love to see you there.
Great. Excellent. Thank you so much for your time, Alison. I really appreciate it.
You're welcome. See ya.
Bye.
The key message here is you are not alone. Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, follow us on Instagram or head over and join our amazing ADHD Mums Podcast Facebook community. Everything you do matters and helps to spread the word about what neurodiversity in females looks like.